All right, in this demonstration, I want to show you how you can install WordPress on the class server. We're going to get later into how to do it on localhost in a separate video, and I'll talk to you more about the differences between those two different installations. But for right now, go ahead and go to wordpress.org, and you can click on the download WordPress and it'll take you to wordpress.org/download. You're going to click where it says download WordPress, and in this case it's 4.0, but if you're watching this at a later date, whenever they've updated to a newer version, it might actually say a different version here. This is always going to give you the latest WordPress version. So if you click that, it'll download it for you. Well, I've already downloaded it to save time, and I put it inside of my downloads folder. So I'm going to open that up. And so here it is, and it's currently WordPress 4.0 version. So I'm going to double click on a Mac to unzip that, and on Windows you would right click and extract all. And it'll give me this folder called WordPress. And I can either leave the name the way it is, or I could change it. What I'm going to recommend that you do is I'm going to go ahead and where it says WordPress, I'm going to go ahead and put the version number on the end. I'm going to put WordPress 4.0, and then that way I'm going to know that that was version 4.0 when I downloaded it. And I like to keep a fresh installation copy of WordPress right here in the event that something goes wrong and I need to go back to those original files. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go into my FTP client, and I'm using FileZilla, and I'm logged in already to my PHP student account. I'm just using, as an example, student 25. You'll use your own. And oops, it looks like it just disconnected me. So, all right, so I reconnected. What I want to do is I'm going to just take this entire WordPress folder and I'm going to upload it. You'll probably have some other files and folders in your root level student directory, but anyway, this is going to take a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pause and we'll come right back when it's done. Okay, so now it's finally finished downloading, and we have our WordPress folder up on the server, and my recommendation to you is to go ahead and rename it. You can leave it this name if you want, but what you need to understand is the name that you name this folder is going to be part of your URL pathway that's mandatory in WordPress, so that every time someone goes to that web address, they're going to see the name of this installation, WordPress 4.0. So I would recommend that you name it something more appropriate, like Project 2 or whatever the name is. If this isn't Project 2, you're using this for something else, then name it appropriately. Okay, so I can go and look at it on the server by typing in the URL, but the thing is that we don't have a database set up for it yet. As you might remember from a previous discussion, there are two main components to WordPress. There's the files in the file system, which would be this WordPress folder, which we've now renamed. And then there's also the database component. We have not yet created the database component. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, to do it, you're going to need some information. You're going to need some server credential information. So if you go into Blackboard, all right, you're going to go to the spot in Blackboard for connecting to the class server. On the very top, you're going to see an Excel spreadsheet, and you're going to click that to download the Excel spreadsheet if you haven't already done so. So go ahead and do that, and then when you're ready, go ahead and open that. I already have mine downloaded. And in this file, you're going to see that there are some things that are hidden. You will see your name on the left, and you'll also see the IP address for the server. And you're also going to see there's a missing password in here for FTP, but you can get that information from Blackboard. I just have it knocked out for the video. So find, of course, your corresponding PHP student number, and I want you to then excuse me, go over to the section where it says DB title, DB username, DB hostname, PHP my admin address. Those are the things that you haven't really messed with so far this semester because we haven't had a need to do it. But now what you're going to do is look at your DB title. That's going to be your database title. And I want you to notice something that's really an important difference. Your FTP username starts with PHP, so it would be PHP student 025, for instance. Whereas your database title and username are going to both be the same, but they don't start with PHP. They're just student 025 and student 025, okay? So it just so happens that the database username and title are the same for our class. That's not always going to be true, but for simplicity, they're going to be the same in our class. Now, you're also going to need some information about the host name, and more specifically, this is what you can't get in Blackboard, is the PHP my admin address that is the specific point of access for your database. Not everybody has the same point of access. So in this file, it'll give you the specific direct link so that you can go straight there and log in with your credentials and your password. And remember, the credential to log in for the database is going to be this DB username. So it's not PHP student 025 or whatever. It's going to be, example would be student 025. Okay, so don't get those two things confused. FTP is a different service than MySQL or MySQL. And so in this case, there are two different usernames and also two different passwords. Okay, so let's just go ahead, and if I were to look at the example that I'm using, so student 025, if I wanted to click on this address, I might have to actually select it, and I think that I might have taken the links off. So I would copy that, and I would go into my browser, and I can open a new window, and I can paste that there. And it's going to give me a login screen here. And you can either go back and get the credentials from that Excel file or in Blackboard. So my student, I already know that my student username is student 025 in my example. And then the password is going to be the one that's in Blackboard. So let's take a peek. Down here underneath where it says database info, okay? And for now, it's going to be a different connection password than your other one. So you should be able to copy and paste. All right, and so we're going to hit go. And it will connect you to the database. And so off to the left, what you're going to see here is you have student 025. That's the actual name of the database. And you'll see that next to it, it says 0. In fact, let me blow it up a little bit so you can see it better. Next to it, it says 0. That means that it has 0 tables. And if I were to click on the database, that basically is telling the MySQL service, it's giving it the use command so that it knows that we're using this database. And now any of the tabs that are up here are going to be relative to that database. This thing that's called information schema, don't worry about that. That's something that you can't modify or adjust. It gives you just some basic information though about, in fact, if we wanted to look at it, it tells you some information about privileges and about your general environment and this installation. So, but I'm going to click on student 25, and it asks me, do I want to create tables on the database? Well, the answer to that is no. I don't want to do that. One of the things that you're not going to have to worry about in the class server is you're not going to have to worry about giving the database user permission to use this database. That's something I'll show you how to do in a separate video when I talk about how to install it on localhost. That's also something that you would eventually have to do on your own hosting web server if you were to install it. I've already done that for the sake of efficiency in this class. So for the purposes of our class server environment, for the database, you already have a database user created with a database assigned to that user. And you're not going to have to mess around with permissions. In fact, you don't really have any permission options, to be quite frank. So right now you see that the database is empty. All right, what we need to do at this point is open a new window, and we need to go to our student directory, and this is what I've got right now in my directory. You're going to have other stuff, but now if I go to the project 2, what it's going to do is it's going to load those WordPress files, and it's going to go to setup config. And the reason it does that is because it automatically sees that I don't have a current configuration file set up already. And so it's going to walk me through this process. So let's go ahead and start clicking through. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to choose English, and it tells you, it warns you what you're going to need in advance. It tells you need your database name, which we have, database username, which we have our password for the database. We have our database host, and if you remember, you're going to have to go back and look in the correct column in that Excel spreadsheet. And then also, I'll talk to you about the database table prefix. So we have all that stuff, so let's go. And we're going to have to enter it here. So the the database name is going to be, like I said before, like your student number. So student 001 or student whatever, student 025. And the database username and the database name are the same in our case for this class server. The password is going to be this, and it's probably blurred out on the screen, so you'll have to go find that password. I just pasted it. And then also the database host is something that you are going to be able to find in that Excel file. So in my case, I'm going to copy it from my column. It's the student 025 DB, crazy long thing with the number. And let's go back here. I'll paste that as well. And it's going to look something like this. It's going to be a lot simpler whenever you're doing it on your local host, but and that's something important to know, that the database host for the class server is going to be different than the one on your local computer, and probably also, unless you choose to make the database username and database name the same, as well as the password, those things are probably all going to be a little bit different. So that's going to be something that we'll talk about later whenever you're going back and forth, if you're doing local development before you make the same changes up on the server for the class server. And that really messes people up sometimes when the config file has different information. Okay, so then lastly, we have something called a table prefix. This is something that I recommend that you change. Where it says WP, that just is the standard default WordPress. One of the reasons that's useful to change this is because anybody who is going to try to do some sort of malicious attack is going to know that the automatic table prefix in WordPress is WP underscore, and they're going to know how to target your specific tables. So it's really a good habit, no matter what you do, to always change that table prefix. So you could do something like P2 for project 2, but make sure you do it with an underscore, and you'll see why later whenever I show you how it looks inside of the database in PHPMyAdmin, so that if you ever needed to go and look at your tables, you could easily identify them. It's harder to find whenever that underscore isn't there. All right, so if I'm going to hit submit, it should automatically run through this properly, and it says, hey, you've done this okay, run the install. And then it's going to automatically drop you here. Don't worry, you can always change this stuff later, but let's just give it a basic site title. So I'm just going to call it Project 2 for right now. I'm totally going to change that. And the username, I would make a unique username. I wouldn't do something like admin or administrator. So you could make it like, your initials or something. I don't know, whatever. We could do something like this. And I went ahead and I put my password in, and it tells you if it's strong or not. Put a good email address in, because if you forget your password, this is how you're going to retrieve it. And then for allow search engines, you can take this, turn it off, or you can turn it on. I would turn it off until you're closer to being ready to do your SEO stuff, and then that way nothing is going to index your site. Install WordPress, and it should take you to the next screen, tells you you're successful, and we're going to go to login. And it should take you to your back end, okay? And from this point forward, we're going to basically stop the demo. I'm going to show you one quick thing, but we'll move on from this point forward in a different video. I do want to show you really quickly, if you go back here and you refresh your connection, you'll notice now that your student 25 has 11 tables in it. If you click on it, it shows you all those tables that just got created, and they all start with P2 underscore. And so Now you can see that this stuff is actually in the database, okay? To see how to do all of the same process on localhost, go ahead and watch that video.